I lost my leg in a motorcycle accident in December 2006. I was on a family holiday in Argentina, and my dad, brother and I did a 5-day motorcycle trip across the Andes. And one of the things that I missed the most was my exercise or sport. And so as soon as I was sort of back up and able, I looked for sport. I was now back in London because I actually was living in London previously, and got involved in sitting volleyball. I got my exercise, psychologically it helped me. I then got into competitive environments and represented Great Britain and played in the Paralympics, which was absolutely fantastic. I don't think I was ever held really back by my leg, except for the idea of finding a sport to get into. That was the hardest part. If anything, it actually sort of gave me the motivation to say, don't hesitate. Like, anything that you were thinking about doing, just go and do it. Like, life is too short. You know, I think the doctor said I had less than a 60% chance of less than a 40% chance of surviving. So when I came out and knew I'd survived, I was like, okay, grab life, like, go for it. And from a young age, as young as I can remember, I've always wanted to go across Africa. There was a romantic appeal to it. There's a sort of a family history of travel in Africa. And you've been keen, you've traveled in Africa by yourself or with friends before as well.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, and I think we were at a point in our lives where we decided to move from the UK to South Africa for a while. And this idea evolved about talking about the move. And wouldn't it be more interesting to drive rather than fly? One of the reasons for me to do the trip was also to prepare myself for living in South Africa. I believe traveling for 4 months through Africa, you know, from Europe, coming down Sub-Sahara, that was my preparation for it, that I'm not afraid, that I'm comfortable in that environment, whatever the challenges are. And I do think I definitely achieved that throughout the trip. It took a while, it took a couple of months. But for me, I think the most emotional experience in terms of my own development was when I managed to enjoy an extreme situation which I couldn't imagine myself to even be in like 3 or 4 months prior, and I felt at absolute peace and comfortable with. We put a sticker on each country we've driven through, and the last one we had is the one for Ghana.
I've been very focused on working in London and forward-looking and goals and objectives and things. I just finished the Paralympics, which was all about goals, and I think the idea of being able to let go and just be in the moment while we're traveling, which you're actually forced to do. You know, you're traveling overland. You could plan your day, you could have your breakfast spot, your lunch spot and your dinner spot, and where you're going to sleep overnight. Within the first hour, the whole plan's changed, you know, because Africa throws things at you. And that idea of just being able to be in the moment and not worry about what's happening in 1 hour or 2 hours time is a very unique space to be in, and I really appreciated that. And I think that whole experience of the trip, by the end of the trip, I didn't want to go back to scheduling. I loved being in that moment and was quite happy to continue with that.
Okay, so now we are coming up to another stretch which is known for extremely deep waters. Anton, how are you going to feel about the stretch of water ahead?
Feeling very confident after our journey for the last like 30-40 kilometers where we've just been going through swamps. So I'm pretty ready and Lorgut's ready. Let's head on in.
And here we go, our guides are in front of us. Just as a note, there are probably about 8 people inside the car, 2 outside, and they have a heavy load. So true African style. Oh, yes. Oh.
We were for 4.5 months driving, the 2 of us. We didn't join other groups of travelers or, you know, did convoy driving or anything. So it was Anton and I for 4.5-5 months in the car by ourselves through West Africa, which is quite, it's quite isolating at some points. And the only way to escape when there's an argument and you need some me time is to look out of the other side of the car window for about 10 minutes until you have to deal with a problem again where you need to be a team. Or the best, I think, was when you were sitting on the rooftop of the car for about half an hour to get some me time when I was driving.
Yeah, we had a little box on the top with some handles, so one of us could sit up there, and the idea was to get a better view, but it also served as like a little separate space.
But that's all
but I mean,
was.
that's it. Like literally, if we had an argument, and then 5 minutes later you had a border control or police check, and you have to both put on the smiles and work together to get through. You know, it taught you quickly to move past the small minor things in life. You know, like don't hold on to anything. Just work together and move through. Like remember, we're going through West Africa as well, so it's French speaking. Neither of us spoke French. So it's not as if we could have deep conversations with other people around us. We didn't have a social outlet. Sometimes we'd bump into travelers, which were few and far between. Like sometimes we're traveling for 2 weeks without seeing another traveler. And you might meet for once at a campsite or something, and then you can have a quick chat for an hour, 2 hours, but then you're going your separate ways the next day. So we didn't have that normal social contact that we're used to. And I think if we were asked what was the toughest, or certainly for me, the toughest element of this trip, that was it. And we never thought about that beforehand. That wasn't something we planned for in detail. It was all about the car and the mechanics and safety and communication, and do we have the right equipment, and you know, money and visas and all the logistics. And we thought we talked about a lot of the personal stuff between us, but we never envisioned that sort of isolation and the need to be the social sort of support for each other to that degree.
Yes.
It certainly brought us closer together because we hadn't known each other for that long before we did the trip, or started planning it at least.
Yeah, so we only knew each other for probably about a year and a half before we embarked on the journey. And I mean, we put like a year and a half of planning into it by finding the car and getting training and all of this. So to be fair, actually, an early part of our relationship was around preparing for that trip, which is part of preparing for a relationship in a way, isn't it? Because you're very open about your fears and your limits and your dreams and your hopes. And you know, putting yourself out there and putting yourself in an extreme situation very early on is actually a very good, looking back, it's actually a very good preparation for
we kind of joke, if you know, you do a trip like this, it either breaks the relationship or makes it. You either come out stronger, or you realize that that's not the person for you, and then you choose to go your separate ways. So so when we planned for this, we didn't know what was going to happen. It seemed like a big thing, taking 5 months living together in a van, crossing 21 African countries, and not knowing what the border officials are going to be like and the visa situations and all of that. But we said, okay, what can we do? What can we control? What can we prepare for? Paul helped us with the car and gave us great advice, and we talked about the security, and we planned where we were going to stop for visas, and we budgeted properly. So we controlled the areas that we could. And then once we started, we learned the next step. And we learned how people could help us on the trip. And we learned that we could manage certain situations and got into a routine. And it just built on itself, and it just evolved, and it became more and more comfortable.
Most of the time, travel brings you things you didn't expect, though. So you need to be, so if you're prepared to travel, you need to be prepared to see and learn something you didn't expect and maybe didn't want to see or didn't discover about yourself as well. So there are both sides of that to travel, I think. Don't let the fear or the worry take away the excitement or the desire for such a trip, because everyone's got fears and concerns about any extreme travel, and prepare for it, like Anton just said, prepare for it, but then you can put it aside and then you can roll with the fun and with the excitement. And I think that is what it's about when you do a travel like that.
I think it's mostly about a learning experience, also a sense of freedom. You've got freedom of movement. Often we're stuck in one place and we move between here and there, and it becomes a habit and the physical constraint of being in those patterns lands up being a mental pattern you get stuck in. And when you break that physical pattern, you're breaking the mental pattern as well. And it gives a sense of freedom, and that's something I really enjoy.
Thank you so much for joining us on our journey. sharing our films and following us. And if you would like to see more, please click on the link below and we'd love you to contribute through Patreon.